Hi there, welcome back to Science 2.0. As you can see, it's a very nippy day out here, and it's freezing, but as we all know, the pursuit of truth cannot be stopped by large amounts of icky snow, so let's keep delving down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole. Today's story of conspiracy theories is about Paul is Dead, the infamous story about Paul McCartney being dead. It all starts in 1960 when four rich white British guys, John Lennon, George Harrison, Paul McCartney, and Pete Best decided to be a cool band. Then they kicked out Pete Best, even though he was just the drummer, and they replaced him with Ringo Starr because Ringo Starr wasn't as gay or as stupid. And the fact is, Pete Best wasn't cool enough for them, and they needed a different drummer. It had nothing to do with musical expertise, since the drummer is the least crucial member of a band and the three guitarists were more important, and they could have just told Pete Best how he could have improved. But whatever, they got Ringo on. Now, whereas the Beatles were together for 9 years and made about 5 albums, the Kinks were together for 30 years and made about 15 albums, but people like the Beatles more because they were able to be more rich and popular among the hip Beatle crowds. So anyway, the point being that the Beatles were on their way to becoming a hit sensation, when in 1977 they thought, how can we be more rich and popular than the Rolling Stones or the Kinks or Herman's Hermits or the Dave Clark Five, who are all pretty much the same as us? And they said, let's make a conspiracy theory. So it goes like this. Paul McCartney was on drugs one night after one of his swinging Beatle parties, and he crashed into the highway and died, and so they had to come up with an identical Paul to be the other Paul, and so it was an epic deception of rock and roll, because the Paul that is today and has been living for the past 40 years isn't really Paul McCartney. His name is Ernie Sklatz, and Ernie Slash is an evil doppelganger who's just posing as Paul, and he's been Paul for so long and pretending to be Paul that he is Paul. And so with this epic conspiracy theory, the Beatles were able to make so much more money because everyone was like, wow, what a great epic conspiracy theory. I guess Paul is dead, but he sounds the same and looks the same and still is the same person. But uh-oh, he's dead, so we better buy these records and try to find masked lyrics in them. And so there's lots of evidence in the famous Beatles songs to back this up. Unlike the Rolling Stones, who revolutionized rock and roll with their peppy, energetic lyrics, or the Kinks, whose lyrics made sense and meant something and were about transvestites and topics of the era rather than just meaningless nonsense, the Beatles songs were poetic nonsense, just scribbled out of the mouths of the Beatles. So one of the songs, Strawberry Fields Forever, which is about strawberry fields that go on forever, has a message at the end that says, let's get it on, dead guy. And some people say it actually says cranberry sauce, but that's fake. It's an epic deception by the Beatles, the most great band ever, who were only together for 9 years and broke up because of a little misunderstanding and haven't been together since, and now 2 of them are dead. I forget which 2. But anyway, and Pete Best has gone on to do absolutely nothing with his life because he had the opportunity to be in one of the greatest bands of all time, but they kicked him the hell out, because who cares about Pete Best? I only care about the 4 famous Beatles: Ringo, Paul, George, and Claude. So anyway, when I went to one of their concerts, the feel was electric. It was like, wow, I know that's not Paul, but the other 3 are the same, so wow, these 4 people are playing music and singing about women in the sky with minerals. Whoa. And they're such great hipsters, you know, what with their incredible progressive lyrics and whatnot. And the point being, I think, is that the conspiracy theory of that Paul wasn't really Paul and he was dead was a big trend at the time and helped them be even more rich and ignore ethnic musicians of the era, such as Sixto Rodriguez or Earth, Wind and Fire. They sold a lot less records than the Beatles, because the Beatles were white, but they were British, so they were still exotic to the American populace, and everyone was like, wow, this cover, they're crossing a street. I bet I can't. Wow, what a amazing album cover. They're crossing a street, and it's all 4 of them, so it must be good, because all 4 of them are in the picture. And everyone likes the Beatles with their great songs that aren't any better than any other band's songs, but, you know, whatever. The point mainly being that the great thing about the Beatles is, another interesting clue, is that on the cover of the album, where they're just 4 guys crossing a street, it says, it shows all 4 of them as like they're in a funeral, and Paul is the corpse, right? And then also on the one where they're in kind of homosexual marching attire, and they're next to some pretty flowers, there's a clue that's like, I don't know, Paul has a corpse on his shoulder of his marching uniform or something, and it looks really creepy. My fingers feel like frozen little sausages, but there's still 3 minutes I have to cover to make this a full episode of Science 2.0, so as I was saying, there's lots of proof that Paul really is dead, and when the impostor of Paul is dead, people can finally, everyone can finally agree that Paul really is dead. But until then, those people who think that the doppelganger is actually Paul will be wrong, because he's not Paul, he's a fake. And I wish I had seen the original lineup of the 4 great British guys, but now Paul is dead and replaced by Ernie Schlamm. So, that's kind of sad to know that I'll never be able to see the true Beatle interesting, because one of them is dead, and they elaborately covered it up because, you know, celebrities, they're great and they deserve our money, but also they pull off epic deceptions. And wow, I sure don't like the Beatles. They sure are awful and horrible for being the Beatles. I mean, no, they're really good. I can't get enough of their fine songs, such as the song about Eleanor Roosevelt that has psycho music in it, because when I think of rock and roll, I think of the psycho violin. So, you know, all of their songs are so depressing, but I just keep listening to them. even though they're not that great of songs, because I know that the Beatles are famous, and I listen to what everyone else listens to. I don't listen to the Kinks. The Kinks were only together for 30 years and made 15 albums. The Beatles were together for 9 years and made 5 albums, but they made more money than the Kinks, so I care more about the Beatles. Who cares about all the other bands of the British invasion? I only care about the Beatles and their great conspiracy theory, their evil conspiracy theory that Paul isn't Paul, he's not Paul, he's Ernie Schlempsch. Okay, thanks for listening to this episode of Science 2.0. It's very cold and I need to go in right now. Okay, come on. Yeah, there we go.